Chase Center now.
Because I like the Bay Bridge. I like the Bay Bridge better than the Golden Gate. I know the Golden Gate is iconic.
What part? What span? Because there's two spans, technically.
I like both spans. I like the East Bay span and the West Bay span. I like both.
The East Bay span has really grown on me.
No, I love it.
At first, I was like, I
love it.
But it looks better than it used to.
I love it.
Too bad it took 10 years late and
I don't care about
billions of dollars overpriced.
I like my East Bay people. I represent for the East Bay because you got iconic moments at the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum. All right, let's go to my boy Richie, the pride of St. John's. We love him here. NBC Sports Bay Area pre- and post-game show with Laura Britt, Colors Ramirez, George Conto, Sean Estes, you name it. Former Giant, of course, and he's on the airways. And I know our boy Sam Lubman, he's so caught up, Richie, in the Giants' 9-game winning streak. We have these show notes, right, Richie? And we have all these questions on here. And the questions for Rich Aurilia is, and I'll read them to you, Richie. Do you think Dunleavy is more likely to shake up the roster or run his quarterback? Where is Draymond Green playing next year? Do you think Poole and Draymond can coexist on his team or has that ship sailed? So he's got nothing but basketball questions for Rich Aurilia. But we're not going to ask you any hoop questions, even though you can do it. How about those Giants, though, Richie?
Woo! Hey, I can handle the hoops questions. I'm watching enough of those ball games, man.
No, I know you can. You gave us one of our best segments this year on Warriors Pre- and Post Game Live. I know you can talk some hoops.
Yeah, that was a fun day. But I know, listen, the talk of the moment's the Giants. So I don't think anybody saw a 9-game winning streak coming.
No,
especially with all the guys banged up that they have right now. But man, it's been kind of nice to see. It's a little right now. I think it's a little reminiscent of the 2021 season with a lot of the late season comebacks and having a feeling that if you just keep the team close, maybe within 2 or 3 runs, you got a chance. Late in the game, and that's what we've seen the past. I can't say the past 2 games. I mean, we saw it in St. Louis too. So the past 9 games or so, we've seen that.
Rich. You were obviously a shortstop. You wore number 35. And, Father Time comes beckoning for all athletes and all of us at some point. So I want your perspective on this. It's got to be difficult, right? Like, Crawford gets a base hit in the 7th inning, gets the game to 3-2, drives it right up the middle. They desperately needed a hit right then and there. And then 9th inning comes around, and the guy who's kind of coming for your spot, I know he plays other positions as well, but he's going to get subbed in. I know they're going with the matchup there, but you've got professional pride. This is the guy coming for my spot, and Crawford doesn't show boo-hoo. He doesn't get angry, stays totally calm, kind of rolls with the flow. Schmidt goes in there, draws a walk. Am I making too much of that dynamic? Because I don't think we're giving enough credit to Crawford in that situation, to Gabe Kapler of having the equity to be able to pull that maneuver. Like, I know that they're all spreadsheet driven, but there's a human element to that. And to me, like, the biggest part of this win streak, he's pulling all the right strings, and guys are buying in.
Yeah, there's a couple sides to that. One is, I do feel for Craw because, I've been that guy. I mean, granted, I wasn't an everyday guy the last few years of my career here as a Giant, but regardless, I think as a player who's played a long time and had the success that he's had, you always feel like you can play every day. You always feel like you can go out and do it and compete at a high level every day. And, not till I was retired for a few years can I sit back and say, man, maybe that last year, maybe I wasn't ready to play. Maybe it was over a year before. And I'm not saying that's what's going on with Brandon. I mean, we got a long season and a lot of time left for him to, contribute and be a big part of his ball club, which he is, to your point, which he is even when he's not playing or when he's, getting pinch hit for. I mean, he's a professional. Guy's been through everything he could be through. So he's just going to sit there. He's going to, take it professionally. Sometimes you may not agree with it while it's going on, but you understand the dynamic of, one, how your season's going. 2, the matchup thing. Listen, we've watched Gabe do this for 4 years now, right? And honestly, surprisingly enough, on the flip side of that, the last 2 nights you see 2 lefties come up in big at-bats and basically win the game against a left-handed pitcher. And I think that's just something about their depth. They're not as deep as they were, to use these line changes. So I do feel for Craw. Hopefully I'm rooting for him to come out of it. But you're right, man. There's a lot of there's a lot of miles on that guy and a lot of innings. And, when you get to a certain age, just sometimes, I was having a conversation just yesterday with just a random fan, and, sometimes things just slow down. Like you said, Father Time kind of comes around, and your bat speed's not the same as it was. Maybe your eyesight's not the same as it was. Maybe your first step quickness on defense isn't the same as it was. But, you got to figure out a way to get through it and help this team compete and win, which I think he will.
Yeah, Rich Aurilia here on the Morning Roast on 95.7 The Game from 99 to 01. Had one of the best 3-year stretches for a Giants shortstop in the history of the Giants. Hit 79 home runs, 256 RBIs, and batting nearly 300. Rich, when we look at this Giants team, and 9-game winning streak, I don't know how they're doing it with the lack of starting pitching that they have right now. DeSclafani scuffling. Cobb's on the IL. Alex Wood is good for 5 innings. Logan Webb has really been the most stable starting pitcher on the staff here. Are the Giants, can we take them serious with this pitching staff in its current state, or do they need to go out and get a big boy to help out Logan Webb in his starting rotation? What do you think the urgency is there when it comes to the pitching staff of the Giants?
Well, I think you take them seriously. Just, granted, the other talk of the National League are the Reds right now.
Yeah.
Was anybody taking them seriously a month ago? No.
Your other squad.
Everybody's standing up and paying attention. So I think you have to take them seriously. I think my concern, though, and you're right, Bonte, is the pitching, because, it's a trickle-down effect, right? So, okay, you have 3 starters that are healthy. You got Webby, who's throwing the ball well.
Mm-hmm.
You had Alex Cobb, who's throwing the ball well, but now he's on the IL.
Mm-hmm.
And Stripling's still on the IL. And you have Wood, who is still coming back from the IL, but even when he was healthy, they were only letting him go 4 1/3, 4 2/3. I mean, it was a luxury if he went 5 innings. So and you see now Brevia, right? You started him or opened him all those games on that road trip, and now he's on the IL.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a trickle-down effect. So it's hard to sustain the way they're doing things now for the long term, because if you keep bringing in, Beck to throw 4 or 5 innings, or Manaea to throw 4 or 5 innings, or whoever else, Wynn to throw 4 or 5 innings, well, but then that affects your bullpen, right? So then those guys got to come in sooner and eat up more innings. So my concern isn't, today. My concern is, what does that bullpen and the rotation look like going into August?
Right.
Mm-hmm. And you bring up, do they need somebody? They need somebody that they can rely on and be healthy. Listen, Cobb's been great.
Yep.
I mean, and that really hurts his team, him going down. But, of course, the next topic should be, well, when do you call Kyle Harrison up? When do you call Kyle Harrison up? Well, in my opinion, you call him up when he could go at least 6 or 7 innings and throw 90 and 95 pitches. And they don't let him do that yet.
Thank you.
So is he really going to help your club coming up when he's going to do the same thing that Beck or Wynn or Manaea or whoever's going to do? So does that really help you? You maybe even infuses some energy into the club and gets the fans excited, but I don't think any fan really wants to see him come out and go 4 innings and throw 75 pitches and then he gets pulled, So I think that's a big need for them. I think they could piece it together offensively. And, what I hit on earlier, you let Yaz hit the other night against a lefty, and you let Jock hit last night against a tough lefty, and they come through. And all that could do for those guys is boost their confidence as an offensive player, that they're in there in game-winning or clutch situations, and they come through, which can only help the team. But I think deep down they really, really need to, I don't even want to say get one arm. I think they're going to need a few.
Yes,
really
no doubt.
That's what we were saying.
Down the stretch.
Yep,
yeah, I think they need
Richie.
2. I think they need 2 mid-level starters at this point, at minimum. And Richie, I'm looking at Luis Matos right now, and he just passes the eye test. I don't know what he'll end up becoming. He's at the very, very beginning, but in terms of gliding the balls in the outfield, plate discipline, speed, Toolsy only begins to explain what you see in him as a prospect. What are you seeing in terms of the eyeball? Because I think he passes the eyeball test.
I see a guy that's playing very relaxed. That's what I see. Which, a lot of pressure sometimes from young players comes from themselves when they press too hard, or they're trying too hard, or they push too hard. And don't forget, like a couple of years ago, let's say 2 or 3 years ago, I mean, this guy's name was mentioned with Luciano and Kyle Harrison, and he just didn't have a good year, so he kind of fell off the radar a little bit. But you always hear, and I I listen to sports talk radio sometimes, and I've heard Farhan say we're not going to call a guy up until he's dominating his level. Well, this is the first guy I feel like they've called up that was dominating the level at the particular time he got called up. Granted, it wasn't for a whole season, but it was for a good chunk. It was about a month or maybe 5-week period where he was just dominating AAA. And yeah, would he have been called up if there wasn't injuries? I don't know. But, the fact that they had some injuries to the outfield and they call him up, I mean, that says a lot about him and what they see. And I just think, like, the plate discipline he shows, he doesn't swing a lot of balls out of the zone.
Yep.
Which is a huge trait for a young player to have. Because most guys, there's so much more scouting up here and digging into what players' weaknesses are. And if you're a young player and you don't chase balls out of the zones, I mean, you're ahead of the game already. If a pitcher knows how I throw this ball like 6 inches off the plate, slider away, and this guy's just going to lay off, oh man, all right, I got to come over the plate a little bit more with this pitch if I want it to be swung out or have it be a strike. So I like what I've seen so far, and I like too that they haven't really pushed him too hard yet. In the sense of like a Casey Schmidt, I think they played him so much right away that now there's the book on him, right? We saw 3 weeks ago Casey Schmidt was a Hall of Famer, right? now he's, I don't know what he's hitting, 260, 265. Right. But again, it's a learning curve and a learning process. And we saw, he had a big at-bat the other night, coming in a pinch hit, and he got a walk. And it's a learning curve. So, a guy like Casey Schmidt, I mean, everybody in the league knows. I mean, you got to watch just a few games to know he swings at the first pitch every time. So you're not going to get that fastball down the middle every time. And he's a guy that could possibly, in the opposite of Matos, he's a guy that I've seen, chase a few pitches out of his zone early in the count. So it is a learning process, but they have a nice little 3 young player core that we've seen called up here in the last 6-7 weeks or so.
Rich Aurilia here on the Morning Rush on 95.7 The Game. Rich, I got to ask you, when you were playing, you heard that smoke on the water come blaring through the speakers when Rob Nan came out of that pen. It was basically automatic. He was going to save that game. You guys are going to go home with a W. Camilo Duvall is giving me those same vibes. I think he has the potential. Not going to put him in the Hall of Fame, but I think he has the potential to be the best closer in San Francisco Giants history, and it's amazing to see him grow. That at-bat against Manny Machado on Monday night, 11-pitch at-bat where he kept his cool. He's throwing cutters, 100 miles an hour. Then he gets him on that slider. And Manny Machado kind of looked back at him. I was like, what? Respect, young kid. Respect. Talk about Camilo Duvall, because it does feel like he's headed to Seattle for the All-Star game. What do you see out of him? Because, again, the potential's through the roof with this kid.
Well, one, I agree with you in the sense that he'll probably go down as the best closer in Giants history. And probably because he's still so young, right? Yeah. He came up at a ripe young age. And again, he was another guy. They didn't really push into that closer role right away. But he's kind of really, really groomed himself to be that closer. And you hit it right on the head, man, Devontae. Poise. The poise this guy has out there. Nothing really seems to rattle him. I think we've seen one time in his career where I think he threw his glove down one time or something. And I think that was just like an anomaly, right? You don't see that very often out of him. Again, in the scheme of things, he's pounding the strike zone a little bit more now, right? Where in the past it was 1-0, 2-0, 3-1, 3-2, it was deeper counts. So as this closer role, you want to see guys like that can pound the zone and get ahead and limit their pitches. And I remember playing, I played with Robbie Nen for years. He's still a great friend. And again, Robbie got to us, not later in his career, but probably mid-career. Right. And Robbie just had that devastating slider, the hard fastball and the slider that looked just like the fastball. But I remember early in my career playing with Rod Beck, who at the time was probably, one of the top closers in baseball. And he told me one time, he goes, my goal is to be within, and this is funny, My goal is to be within 8 pitches of being ready to go in the game because I know I get 8 pitches on the mound when I come in the game to warm up. So if I know I'm close, I tell them I'm ready, and I go and I get 8 more pitches. And 2, he goes, 2 out of the first 3 pitches that I throw to a hitter, I want them to be strikes. Whether the ball's put in play, or whether it's swung and miss, or whether it's a swing over the top of a split finger. He goes, that's how I limit my pitches, where it means I could be available for the next day or the next couple of days in a row. And I think that we're starting to see that with Duvall. His pitch count's getting lower and lower. I think each time he gets in there, and granted, you're going to have an at-bat where a guy has an 11-pitch at-bat. I mean, you're facing a future Hall of Famer in Machado, right? You expect that. But he's really, really transformed into a really nice piece to this Giants puzzle, and especially looking forward the second half of the season, where you're going to need that guy down the stretch, maybe to go 2 innings.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting point that you made about Rod Beck. I really like that.
Yeah.
Richie, I'm looking at infield defense. Last year, base running and infield defense, horrific. Just not good. The lack of being able to shift, I thought was going to really kill them. And then I look around and I'm like, whoa, J.D. Davis looks solid, like really solid at third base. I didn't see that coming. Wow, Cross still got it. Obviously, Schmidt up the middle. Estrada could play there a little. Estrada, he didn't look good at second. Let's just call it what it is. And he looks great this year. Lamont Wade Jr. at first base. Didn't see this coming. They've done a great job developing their infield defensively, and I just didn't see that coming. Are you as surprised as I am?
I'm surprised at a few, but I'm not surprised at others. Let's start with Schmidt, the youngest guy in that group. I mean, that's all we heard about him coming up, right? He was a Matt Chapman-like third baseman. So his defensive skill does not surprise me. His arm is second to none. So that doesn't really surprise me. Even when you're moving the shortstop, he's young, so he could still move around really well, and he could handle that position. But then you move around. J.D. Davis, listen, he played for the Mets, right? We didn't really get a lot of those games out here. Yeah, he didn't play a lot. I mean, from what I remember, I don't think he was an everyday player, but we've seen him, and at times this year, he's played Gold Glove caliber third base. He's made some of the best plays I've seen this year. And then you move over to first, and Lamont Wade, he's done a fantastic job over there. You're going from a guy who, I don't know how Belt never won a Gold Glove, but you're replacing a guy who is really, really good defensively, and you're holding your own. And the knock on Tyro was his defense. And listen, here's the one thing that defensively, which I don't agree with, are the metrics of defense. Because defense to me is hard to judge with a number.
I agree.
Because last year, on our show, Carlos Ramirez was like, yeah, look, Tyro ranks like in the bottom 3 in Major League Baseball in whatever it was. Defensive,
it was range and defensive outs over whatever. I'm with you.
But I don't ever remember him at second base. I don't ever remember him costing the Giants a game with his defense. I don't ever remember that. It was like when I played with Jeff Kent. His defense got knocked all the time. Like, he's a third baseman playing second base. But Jeff never cost us any games on defense. And that's how I feel about Tyro. Like, he's gotten better this year, probably because they looked, because you know how analytically driven this team is.
Right.
They probably looked at the analytics and said, you really need to work on your defense this winter. And whether it be your first step quickness or, getting to a ball 3 steps to your left and trying to get in front of it instead of back, whatever it is. But I've never felt like he's a terrible second baseman.
Right.
And he has improved this year. So you look at all that work that's been done and the guys that they brought in and the guys that are changing positions and this and that, they've done a nice job. And I don't worry about Crawford, man.
No, I don't
really
either.
don't. I don't. He's going to make his errors. You're going to make errors, but I don't really worry about him. And then it's funny, you brought up the base running stuff, and I think that was all just one guy.
Luis.
Last year was like Dubon, I think.
Well, Luis Gonzalez was bad too.
So they have made some strides, and it's nice that this 9-game winning streak's going on. It seems like they're clicking on all cylinders, but again, they need to get a little healthier, get some guys back, especially in that rotation. And then, you didn't even bring up the outfield defense. I think the outfield defense has been pretty darn good.
Yazin Wright is elite, and then you put Matos in center, and then you slide over Conforto to left. I think it's a great outfield defense.
I mean, I like that they have options out there where when you have Matos, Conforto, and Yaz out there, you basically have three guys that could play center.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They could. And when you have that in that big outfield, and you have, and listen, I think, for me, this is just me personally, I think Yaz has played more right field there, and I like Conforto in left just because of the experience of handling that right field and that right center field with the wind, with the deep right center, gap there. And I think that's the outfield you're probably going to see for quite a while because of Haniger being out for an extended period of time. And, now, when you play Slater against lefties, is that going to be, you're going to move Conforto back to right and then put Slater in left? I don't know, but it's nice to have those options. And, they are playing, way better. They did get better definitely in the outfield than they have been in years.
No doubt about that. Rich Aurilia here on the roast. I'm glad you brought up Jeff Kent because I think he needs more love about here. I've been banging on town. I want Jeff Kent back in town. He's a great guy, man, and should have a lot more consideration for the Baseball Hall of Fame, man. I mean, those numbers you put up at second base, but that's a conversation for another day. Richie, we got to run. We always appreciate the time. Hopefully you're doing well up in Napa, and we'll see you on the tube. When are you back on TV?
I actually had the whole month of June off because I had a full slate on the personal side of things. So I'm back July 3rd. So I will be back for the holiday, back on TV. And hopefully, Bonte, you figure out that Warriors stuff by then. Let's go.
Oh, man.
Get it going, man.
Draymond Green, Klay Thompson. I don't know what we got new GM, Mike Dunleavy Jr. I was just talking to Willie yesterday, man. We don't know what's going on, but we'll be back, and we can't wait to see you back in the studio.
Thanks, Richie.
All right, guys. Take care, man.
Anytime. Rich Aurilia, good sport here on the Morning Roast on 95.7 The Game.